It was late, the kind of late where the world outside seems to hold its breath, waiting for the dawn. But for Aadhya, these quiet hours were not for sleep, not yet. They were hers, sacred. For almost 16 months, these stolen moments, late nights, early mornings, weekend afternoons, had been dedicated to weaving a world entirely of her own making. Aadhya, an experienced graphic designer, navigated her days in the bright, often demanding world of corporate marketing. She was known there as capable, creative even, her designs clean and effective. But she moved through the office with a quiet reserve, a gentle presence that rarely drew the spotlight. Her colleagues saw the professional surface, unaware of the deeper currents running underneath. Her mixed Indian-British heritage, a tapestry she had been exploring with growing curiosity and connection in recent years, remained largely unspoken in the corporate space. It was a quiet melody playing just for her, a source of growing personal richness. But here, in the cocoon of her flat, bathed in the screen's soft light, another Aadhya existed. The writer, the dreamer, the architect of a story that felt both deeply personal and courageously imaginative. Her novel followed Elodie, a young French woman who wanted to experience the world, but found herself in the bustling, often impersonal landscape of East London. Elodie is grappling with a crisis that has turned her life upside down, forcing her to question everything she had taken for granted. Unable to trust her judgment, she could only watch as her life unraveled, and her sense of self began to dissolve. Then, one afternoon following another stressful, nerve-jangling day, Elodie found herself wandering through Ladbroke Grove in West London, unsure as to how she got there. She had stumbled into a dusty old bookshop that stirred vague recognition, very familiar yet impossible for her to place. Another frightening gap in her fragmented memory, she thought. This was becoming far too common. Without thinking, Elodie picked out a random book and began to read. For the briefest of moments, a whisper of calm washed over her before slowly vanishing. Moved by this fleeting peace, she slowly closed the book, glanced at the title, and carried it to the cashier's desk. Amidst all the turmoil in her life, an unexpected mix of curiosity and contentment sat with her as she put her copy of the Bhagavad Gita into her bag. Aadhya poured her own explorations, her own tentative understanding of this ancient wisdom, into Elodie's journey. She traced the unexpected parallels Elodie finds between the Gita's profound teachings on duty, non-attachment, and the nature of the self, and her own messy modern struggle towards acceptance and peace. It was a story about finding timeless anchors in a turbulent world, and now, after almost 16 months of patient, persistent effort, like tending a hidden garden, the first draft of her manuscript was complete, a final sentence typed, and a long, deep breath exhaled into her quiet room. A feeling not of triumphant fanfare, but of quiet, profound satisfaction settled over her. She had done it. She had walked this path, word by word, page by page. Sharing this hidden part of herself felt like stepping into sunlight. After a long time in darkness, blinking and exposed, those feelings of being insecure, uncertain, and completely vulnerable were quickly becoming the norm. Her best friend Chloe had been her earliest confidant, showering Aadhya with enthusiasm in the beginning. But lately, she noticed a subtle shift in her friend's behavior towards her. When Aadhya finally shared the news of completion, Chloe's congratulations felt muted, followed by hesitant concerns about the niche subject matter. "Are you sure people will connect with something so philosophical?" Chloe had asked, her brow furrowed. Aadhya wondered if the concern was truly for the book, or perhaps a reflection of the time Aadhya's writing had taken away from their old routines, or the fact that she had simply finished something she had started. Her boyfriend, James, inhabited a different world entirely, outwardly confident and ruthlessly pragmatic. His existence seemed to revolve around status symbols, weekend rugby with the boys, and boasting about his latest achievements at the office, whatever that meant. Instead of reading her new book as promised, he'd simply skimmed the first few pages with a distracted air, handing it back with a casual shrug. "It's nice, Aadhya. Well written. But maybe think about something more commercial next time? Something with a broader appeal?" His words, meant perhaps to be practical, landed like small stones, bruising her newly exposed hope. Dismissive, unseeing. He hadn't truly read it, hadn't felt the heart beating within the pages. A familiar ache surfaced, that quiet loneliness of being misunderstood, even by those you thought were fighting by your side. A single simple thought came into Aadhya's head. Goodbye, James. Seeking connection and a place where she could find the help that she needed to refine her manuscript, Aadhya took the brave step to join a local writers group that she'd found online. The first few meetings were a mixed experience. There was an undercurrent of competition, subtle comparisons woven into critiques, a jockeying for perceived status. It wasn't overtly hostile, but it lacked the warm embrace of true community she had hoped for. Most members seemed more focused on spotting flaws than on understanding intent. But then there was Layla, a woman perhaps in her late 60s with kind eyes that seemed to hold reservoirs of quiet wisdom, had published poetry decades ago, a fact she mentioned only briefly, modestly. Layla read Aadhya's submitted chapter with a stillness, a focused attention that felt like a gift. Afterwards, she sought Aadhya out. "There's a real depth here, Aadhya," Layla said, her voice soft but clear. "You're exploring something significant. Don't let anyone rush you or push you off your path. This story has resonance." Layla's words were like water on parched earth. Simple, genuine encouragement. It was a lifeline in the sea of ambivalent and critical voices. Yet the challenges persisted. Sarah, another group member, seemed particularly keen to dissect Aadhya's work with a detached, almost surgical precision. She questioned her choice of the Bhagavad Gita, framing it as an obscure element that alienated readers. "Are you sure you're not just projecting your own interests onto the character?" she'd challenged, ignoring the deeply personal connection Aadhya felt to the material, the very connection that gave the story its soul. Her critiques often felt less about helping the story and more about asserting her own literary authority. These ripples seemed to spread even to her professional life. During a slightly awkward team-building event focused on sharing hidden talents, Aadhya, feeling a surge of fragile confidence fueled by Layla's encouragement, mentioned she had written a novel. The reaction was mostly surprised silence, followed by polite, slightly bewildered smiles. Later, she noticed the sales director, David, making pointed remarks in meetings about passion projects and the importance of focusing on realistic, achievable goals. He'd talk about keeping feet firmly on the ground, sometimes catching Aadhya's eye as he spoke. It was subtle, deniable, but the implication felt clear. Dreaming was a distraction, perhaps even a sign of not being serious about her real job. "Did you hear about Aadhya writing a book?" whispered one of her colleagues near the coffee machine. The surprise seemed tinged with a strange sort of doubt that ordinary, quiet Aadhya would dare attempt something so ambitious, so different. It felt as though her quiet act of creation was being interpreted as a strange rebellion against her perceived place. The cumulative weight of these reactions, the doubt, the dismissal, the subtle undermining, began to press down on Aadhya's spirit. Her initial quiet satisfaction started to fray at the edges, replaced by a creeping self-doubt. Was Chloe right? Was James right? Was Sarah right? Was David right? Was this whole endeavor a foolish, self-indulgent dream? The joy she had found in the late-night hours began to dim, overshadowed by the imagined judgments of others. Her confidence, never robust in the face of external scrutiny, wavered like a candle flame in a draft. She found herself staring at the manuscript on her laptop, not with love, but with apprehension. Who was she to think she could weave ancient philosophy into a modern tale? Who was she to believe this story deserved to be read? One afternoon, feeling particularly adrift, Aadhya met up with Layla for coffee. She confessed her spiraling doubts, the chorus of critical voices echoing in her mind. Layla listened patiently, her gaze steady and compassionate. She didn't offer easy platitudes. Instead, she began to speak gently about resilience. She talked about the Stoic philosophers, figures like Marcus Aurelius, who wrote about focusing intensely on what was within one's control, our own actions, our own judgments, our own intentions, and letting go of what was not, like the opinions or reactions of others. They understood, Layla said softly, that true peace doesn't come from controlling the world outside, but from mastering the world within. It reminds me, she continued, of commentaries I've read on the Gita, the concept of karma yoga. Performing your duty, your work, with dedication and skill, but relinquishing attachment to the fruits of that labor, finding fulfillment in the action itself, regardless of praise or criticism, success or failure. Aadhya listened, captivated. Two distinct streams of wisdom, ancient Rome and ancient India, converging on a single powerful insight. Focus on your effort, your intention, the integrity of your work. That is within your power. Let go of the need for external validation, the anxiety about the outcome. That lies beyond your control. It wasn't about not caring, Aadhya realized. It was about shifting the focus of her care, caring deeply about the work, the process, the truth she was trying to express, caring less about whether others approved or understood. This insight felt like finding a key to a locked room within herself, a source of quiet strength, independent of the shifting winds of external opinion. Inspired, Aadhya started a new practice. She bought a simple, beautiful journal. When feedback came, whether from the writing group, imagined critics, or even her own internal doubts, she wouldn't just react defensively or crumble inwardly. She would bring it to her journal. She crafted questions inspired by both traditions. Is this feedback coming from a place of understanding my intention? Is this person qualified to judge this specific aspect? That was Stoic discernment. Am I becoming too attached to praise or too wounded by criticism? What is my real work here? This was based around the concept of karma yoga and non-attachment. What part of this feedback, stripped of emotion, genuinely serves the story? What action can I take to improve the work itself? This encompassed both traditions, focusing on controllable action. Aadhya began to practice non-attachment, not as cold indifference, but as a quiet liberation. She showed up to her writing, not with anxiety about its reception, but with renewed dedication to the craft itself. She focused on the rhythm of the sentences, the truth of the characters, the resonance of the themes. The joy which had flickered began to glow steadily again, emanating from the doing, not the anticipating. It was the quiet courage Elizabeth Gilbert spoke of, showing up for your creativity, honoring the process itself. It was the resilience Cheryl Strayed talks about, finding strength not by avoiding difficulty, but by navigating it with authenticity. And it was the practical wisdom Ryan Holiday illuminates, applying ancient Stoic principles to find balance in modern life. The next writing group meeting felt different for Aadhya. Sarah, predictably, launched into another critique of her latest revisions, focusing again on the perceived inaccessibility of the philosophical elements. In the past, Aadhya would have felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She might have defensively tried to explain her choices, seeking her approval, or shrunk back in silence, wounded. This time, something had shifted. She listened calmly, breathing evenly. She acknowledged Sarah's points with a quiet nod. "Thank you, Sarah," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I hear your concern about accessibility." She paused, meeting Sarah's gaze directly, not with defiance but with quiet conviction. "However, the philosophical core is essential to Elodie's journey and to the story I need to tell. My focus is on integrating it authentically, trusting that the emotional truth will resonate." There was no defensiveness, no pleading, just a calm statement of her artistic intent. She wasn't seeking Sarah's validation anymore. She was anchored in her own understanding of the work. Sarah seemed momentarily taken aback, unsure how to respond to this quiet self-possession. Layla caught Aadhya's eye across the room and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Aadhya felt a surge, not of victory, but of quiet peace. She had navigated the storm without being thrown off course. The transformation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a gradual, internal realignment. Aadhya found herself sinking back into the writing and revision process with a renewed sense of purpose, a deep contentment she hadn't felt before. She wasn't writing to prove herself to her soon-to-be ex-boyfriend, or to impress the writing group, or even to silence the doubts whispered in the office. She was writing because the story itself called to her. She was writing to explore the truths that mattered to her, weaving together the threads of her heritage, her observations of the world, and the wisdom traditions that offered her solace and strength. She was writing for the sheer, quiet joy of creation, of bringing something new into existence, sentence by careful sentence. She was also writing for Elodie. The outcome felt secondary now. The real reward was here, in the process, in the connection to her own voice, her own vision. This inner shift radiated outwards in subtle ways. A quiet confidence began to surface, not just in her writing, but in those parts of Aadhya that had been hidden for far too long. Then, just like that, another ordinary Tuesday came along. It was a client meeting at a sleek, glass-walled office just off Chiswick High Road. Aadhya was there to present some design concepts. Her firm had brought her along with her sales director, David. The client's managing director, Jane, had also brought someone along to help her evaluate the pitch, an external consultant named Sophie Thomas. Her role was to offer an independent perspective on the presentation's narrative and overall impact. Sophie's insights during the meeting were sharp and articulate, and her involvement turned out to be one of those unplanned and curious coincidences of life. After the formal meeting concluded, there was the usual milling about, coffee cups clinking, polite goodbyes exchanged. Aadhya found herself standing near Sophie by the window overlooking the city. They exchanged a few pleasantries about the project. Then, something prompted Aadhya to talk about her life outside of design. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence that she now carried, or a gentle push from something unknowable. The words just came out. It's intense balancing work with personal projects, Aadhya remarked casually. What do you mean? Asked Sophie. I love writing, and have just finished my first novel. I'm actually quite proud of it. But sharing it with others has been such a painful experience. The criticism and the self-doubt that accompanies it. Well, let's just say it's a definite learning experience. This was quickly followed by one of Aadhya's customary warm but slightly awkward smiles. Sophie's eyebrows lifted with genuine interest. Really? That's fascinating. What's it about? Aadhya hesitated, but the words continued to leave her lips. She gave a brief, heartfelt summary. Elodie, the main character. The crisis unraveling in London, the unexpected discovery of the Bhagavad Gita, and the subsequent journey of discovery, and ultimately, triumph. As she spoke, she saw a spark of recognition and real curiosity in Sophie's eyes. That sounds genuinely intriguing, Sophie said thoughtfully. In case you are interested, Jane is a good friend of mine and we used to work together. She asked me if I could help out today. However, and this feels rather strange to say, but I also work for a small independent publishing house. We're still quite young, but we are growing and are always on the lookout for new and unique voices. Sophie had a warm, friendly smile on her face, and Aadhya's heart gave a quiet leap. For a brief second, she forgot about her practice of non-attachment and stoicism. She just smiled back and blurted out something from her past. It's probably quite different from what you usually handle, Aadhya started, but Sophie interrupted gently. Honestly, the unique concept is definitely something that catches my attention, and I do love the fact that we met in this way. I can't promise anything, of course. The industry is tough, but would you be willing to send it to me? I'd be genuinely interested to take a look when I have a moment. Aadhya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Yes, she said, her voice calm despite the inner thrill. Thank you. They exchanged contact information, a simple professional transaction that felt charged, with unseen potential. A few days later, Sophie was sitting comfortably on the train, the long journey from King's Cross to Edinburgh in front of her, her customary travel mug of tea beside her, along with Aadhya's manuscript resting open on her lap. The Unseen Pages, working title. As Sophie reads Aadhya's work, sunlight streams through the window, catching the gentle rhythm of her turning the pages, one after another. She is absorbed, lost in Elodie's journey, captivated by the unfolding tapestry of London streets woven with unexpected strands of ancient wisdom. The world outside blurs into green and gold streaks, but Sophie turns yet another page, her focus entirely on the words, on the quiet power building within the story. She shifts slightly in her seat, and as she does, she becomes aware of the expression on her own face. A smile. She realizes, with a little jolt of surprise, that she has been smiling softly for quite some time as she's been reading, lost in the story's journey. By the time the train begins to pull into Edinburgh, Sophie is almost halfway through the book. She's tired, but at the same time doesn't want to put it down, and she's still smiling. She bookmarks her page carefully, though her mind is still very much with Elodie. She looks out of the window, slowly coming back to reality, and then, a few seconds later, she reaches for her phone. 400 miles further south, in the quiet glow of her own flat, Aadhya sits at her desk. She isn't anxiously waiting. She isn't replaying the conversation with Sophie endlessly in her mind. She is working on something new, a flicker of an idea, a character sketch, the beginnings of another journey onto the page. Her quiet contentment is palpable. She has found her center, her fulfillment in the work itself, in the steady, faithful act of creation. This is the wisdom lived, joy discovered. Not in the destination, but on the path. Peace found not in external applause, but in internal alignment. Though sometimes, just sometimes, life offers unexpected notes of grace to those who persist with courage and pure intention. Aadhya's phone, resting silently, face down on the bed next to her, suddenly springs into life. Startled, Aadhya goes to pick it up, and on the screen it simply reads, Sophie Thomas. Outside, the quiet hum of the city continues to make itself known, but inside, in the small sanctuary of Aadhya's flat, a new chapter feels poised, waiting to begin.